Well, hello everyone. My name is Carolus Riyad, and I am the CEO of Enough, a spin-off B Corp of the Waste Not, Want Not student initiatives that started at Concordia University in 2016. Now, should all university students have to learn about sustainability and the climate crisis in their curriculum? I encourage you to share your thoughts on that questions in the comments. Last year, Concordia Student Union put that question to referendum, which I am going to show now on the screen. And the majority of students, 89% of Concordia undergraduate students answered yes to it, with a turnout of over 20%, which was the highest in the union's history. Earlier this week, I reached out to Concordia's president, Graham Carr, and Provost Ann Whitelaw to inquire if there has been any progress towards a Senate vote. Towards a vote at Concordia Senate to make the institution commitment that the students are calling for, and there's no progress towards that Senate vote. This week, the Arts and Science Student Federation is also running a similar referendum question specifically targeting Concordia's Faculty of Arts and Science. And in Concordia's last submission to STARS made last December, Concordia answered no to a question asking, has the institution adopted one or more sustainability learning outcomes that apply to the entire student body, or at minimum, to the institution's predominant student body? According to the same submission, only 19% of Concordians graduate from programs with mandatory sustainability curriculum. The national average in Canada is 37%. In these referendum campaigns, students are simply asking for this answer and the reality behind it to change. To discuss why this is important, today I'm joined by three guests, Madame Jennifer Maccarone, representative of the Westmount St. Louis Quebec's National Assembly, who's also former president of the Quebec English School Boards Association, as well as Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, and Mr. Phil Baty, Chief Knowledge Officer at Times Higher Education, who has well over 25 years of experience in the field of university performance and strategy, the creator of Times Higher Education World's Academic Summit, and he oversees all of Times Higher Education's international events, including the annual Global Sustainable Development Congress. And Mr. Daniel Fourget, Sustainability Coordinator at Laval University, who has been supporting it in achieving the remarkable accomplishment of having 97% of Laval's graduates learning about sustainability in curriculum, an example that Concordia and all other universities should follow. Thank you all for taking part in that, and now without further ado, let's begin. And I would like to start by playing a clip from a TV that ran on CBC covering last year's sustainability curriculum referendum campaign.
Committee at Concordia University wants climate to have a bigger role in what students learn. The group made the issue a student referendum question, taking its inspiration from another Quebec university. Matt Demour explains.
A few years ago, climate science professor Damon Matthews brought an idea to his department to have a bigger climate curriculum at Concordia University, which could reach more students.
It's a civil issue. It's a social justice issue. I mean, there's all I can't think of a single university discipline that would not benefit.
The idea didn't go any farther, but now a committee at the school is taking it to students. A referendum question in this week's student union by-election poses the following. Should there be a commitment that all Concordia students will learn about sustainability and the climate crisis in their curriculum by 2030? One of the people who got the question on the ballot is postdoctorate fellow Carolus Riyad. He says this gives students the chance to send an important message to the university.
This is really the spirit of this referendum question, is to tell them, well, this is the biggest challenge of our lifetimes. Please give us the tools to be able to contribute to solutions.
Riyad doesn't want to see a one-size-fits-all approach to teaching students about climate change and sustainability. Instead, he says it should be tailored and relevant to each student's discipline. It's a similar idea to the one adopted at Laval University in Quebec City several years ago.
The basic is that under our study regulations, any student that goes through an undergrad program has to have a basic understanding of what is sustainable development.
With the vote ongoing, Concordia wouldn't comment on the referendum question, but a spokesperson told CBC that the university is working on several programs that will incorporate or focus on sustainability. Students have until Thursday to cast their votes in the referendum. Matt Demour, CBC News, Montreal.
Mr. Baty, first, I understand you were just in Montreal this October, and my first question, the most important question today, how did you find our team?
Well, you know what? I was at Concordia University in McGill, and I had a few presentations on the wonderful culinary delights of Montreal and the cultural highlights. And I was worried I wasn't going to get any poutine, but I did manage to grab some at a late night bar, and it was exactly the right moment to have it. I believe late night in a bar, it worked and it did the job. So yes, it was a great cultural experience to have some.
Wonderful. Now, the introduction of Times Higher Education's impact rankings around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals has been very energizing to me. And I think maybe the most relevant question to today's discussion is this one here, where it asks if the university had made a commitment to meaningful education around the SDGs across the university is relevant and applicable to all students. And also, I know that Times Higher Education also published a report in May where where one of the question it asked this 3,000 international students, prospective students to universities, was to what extent such a commitment actually applies or factors into their decision of choosing which university to go to. And I'm wondering if you can break down some of the key findings from that survey.
Yeah, I think we found very clearly that students are increasingly demanding that their universities do provide them with the tools to be sustainable citizens. We actually asked them about their sense of what sustainable citizenry is, and 79% agreed overall that they wanted to be sustainable in their own lives and their own existence. They believed in their personal responsibility. But when you delve into that a little bit more, we could see there was almost over 80% actually very strongly agreed that they believe their universities had a responsibility to help them, give them those tools, so primarily through teaching, but providing them with the values, the practices, the skills and knowledge to become sustainable citizens. And then they also, around 70%, said that it was a really important factor in their sense of their future careers. They believe that their future lives, their careers would be, enhanced by actually having that sustainable mindset and that knowledge and understanding of the massive challenges that the world's facing. So students are increasingly saying they want this. And they're also increasingly saying that they want to hold their universities to account for this as well. There was a high level of agreement in the survey that they look for evidence of a commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals in general. So we saw a very high proportion wanting to see evidence of a commitment to diversity and inclusion. So they're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals in the round, but within that, they also said that they are starting increasingly to look to the Times Higher Impact rankings to have that reference point to see whether the university has stepped forward, made that public commitment to being accountable for its contribution to the goals, and particularly the climate crisis is obviously a major rallying point there. So yeah, students are really clearly making it obvious they need their universities to support them to become sustainable citizens.
Yeah. Mr. Forget, I've always been very inspired by Laval's University's model and accomplishment around this. And as I mentioned in my introduction, over 97% of students at Laval graduate from programs with mandatory sustainability curriculum. How did Laval University do it? What was the process? Can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it began prior to my arrival at Université Laval. It was in 2009. The actual date is May 2009 when we voted for a new article within our academic regulation. So Sustainable Development's initiation for all undergraduate program is now embedded as an article regarding transversal competencies development. So it's a learning outcome at the same level as teamwork or deontology. So this academic regulation is reinforced with a periodic assessment and intern programs. So it takes roughly 10 years to go through all the programs at Laval. And that's for the first 83% of the 97% you just told that we submitted to STARS accreditation, because 83% of our annual diplomies come from undergrad programs. Mm-hmm. And as for the master's and doctorate, there are roughly 80% of them that add a learning outcome in sustainable development. And to determine this, we had three criteria. Mm-hmm. First, the evidence rule. A master program in sustainability does count. Secondly, we look through the program objectives. if those program objectives could contribute to sustainable development, the program was added with its diplomies. As for example, a master in electrical engineering does talk about renewable energies within its general objectives. And lastly, programs that had a mandatory course in identifying this in sustainable development were added as well, because teachers had the chance to self-identify around 400 courses at Laval. So all undergrads plus 80% of graduate programs diplomies does equal around 97% of all diplomies.
So it started with an institutional mandate at the Education Commission at Laval.
It started all with the implementation of an article in the academic regulation.
And I remember the text, or at least what I understand from your submission to start, is that the vote was only specified undergraduate programs, and from what you're saying now is that you actually push that even further.
Well, we're trying to push it to master level, master degrees and doctoral degrees, but also we're trying to add stronger verb. It's not initiation that we want to modify the academic regulation. It's now about engaging action towards sustainability, and that's a little different, and we had rough times in study commissions.
Well, congratulations for your accomplishment, and thank you for your leadership on this, and everybody at Laval University. Madame Maccarone, we spoke about the international competitiveness argument for ensuring that all students have sustainability curriculum, and the inspiring example of Laval University and the accomplishment of having 97% of their students learning and having mandatory sustainability curriculum. Given that education is a provincial jurisdiction, what should the Quebec government do to advance this cause?
So first of all, I'd like to start off by saying it's a great question, and I'm very happy to be here, and especially proud because I'm a mom of a Concordia student today. So I feel very, very proud to be a part of this panel today. I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that we're on track, but I'm not sure that we're moving fast enough provincially in terms of the responsibilities that we have. Other than Laval University, I believe there's also Sherbrooke University, there's Montreal, there's the Université de Québec at Rimouski, and there's others that have programs that teach sustainable development, but it's going to take a lot more promotion, a lot more awareness, and obviously a lot more funding from the government to provide the necessary resources for these programs that are going to train our youth and really focus on that long-term sustainable impact that I know that we're all seeking. You're right. I think everybody sort of said it without coming out to say that education is the cornerstone of society, and it's our best weapon to protect against climate change and also our best ally to provide a sustainable future. If you look at the government's plan for a green economy by 2030, the government only mentions the word education and university once. Which is a supreme disappointment because clearly universities need to be at the heart of the government's green economy plan. The government needs to adopt a sustainability strategy that's going to empower our universities and the staff and the students to be innovative and collaborative and put into place real necessary change. And that can only happen from taking action through people like you, through the community, and of course, elected officials like me. I work in the opposition, which gives me the impetus to be able to put pressure on the government to vary, to implement, and to support their education component in their action plan for a green and sustainable economy, because obviously they have not gone far enough. And it should be one of the number one things that we're debating at the National Assembly and that we're talking about. And I say all that, even if we are going to be doing those investments, one of the things that I think that we need to be doing from an educational standpoint, as well as a government standpoint, is supporting our professors, because if we're going to be asking them to adapt, they need to be supported and they need to be part of that conversation. The other thing that I think the government needs to clearly invest in and talk about is eco-anxiety. One of our young, all of our young people think today would probably agree that they're experiencing a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of stress that's related to the environment and climate crisis. And so obviously this is an issue that impacts all areas, and it's essential to have an interdisciplinary approach between education and sustainable development. So the government needs to wake up and they need to make it one of the number one priorities that we're debating now in the House.
Thank you so much. And for just to to clarify, well, follow-up question. So if there was if Quebec would vote on putting a regulation requiring that all university students have sustainability curriculum in their programs, would that be something that you would support?
Absolutely. But again, done through a proper consultation and support to make sure that it's not just something that's going to be words that we put together in a law, but something that's actually going to be able to put into place because we've given it careful consideration, but it should be nimble. We need to do it now. We need to not spend hours and hours and hours and hours consulting, but we need to put something together that's already based on the research that exists so that we know that we'll be able to implement it across the educational sphere. And that goes just beyond university, right? So I'm hoping that if there is a bill that's adopted where we're talking about higher education, that's also going to be something that we're talking about youth sector, vocational education. It's something that needs to be implemented across the board. So if it's thoughtful and well done, 100% behind that.
Wonderful. Mr. Baty, earlier in the year, we hosted also Duncan Ross, who's the architect of the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings and the chief data officer. And one of the questions that always comes up when in these discussions within the university is sort of the perceived conflict between having an institution-wide commitment around sustainability curriculum and academic freedom. And I asked him to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to play his responses, and I'm going to ask you to add your thoughts as well. I've been a student representative at Concordia for some 6-7 years, and I've sat on an inordinate number of committees. I sat on Senate, curriculum committees, sustainability committees, what have you. And I've been trying to advocate for the university to adopt an institutional commitment to teaching all students about sustainability. And the number one issue that comes up is academic freedom, and the idea that senior administration cannot tell professors what to teach. And my understanding from Times Higher Education Impact Ranking is that you give points to universities who have made, a commitment to meaningful education that's around the SDGs, that's applicable to all students. And so I guess my question is, are you rewarding universities that infringe on the academic freedom of the professors?
Well, I wouldn't agree with that perspective. I mean, it strikes me as quite an interesting line to take. For example, if your university has a physics course, you expect your physics teachers, your physics lecturers to lecture to a curriculum. And you would be quite surprised if a physics lecturer decided that they were going to decide that gravity didn't exist and therefore insist on teaching to that. Because it's not as if a lot of the aspects that we're talking about here are in dispute. Climate change is not a fringe theory. It is a well understood, it is a well established and almost universally agreed upon fact. Almost universally, obviously there are a few people somewhat south of your border, perhaps, shall we say. But broadly speaking, these are not contentious issues. So I think that there is room within curricula to actually include aspects of sustainability, of climate action, which needn't infringe on academic freedom. Of course, how individual academics choose to teach it, what they want to focus on, what the things are that are important to them will vary. And we try and write our questions in the impact ranking to be open to that, to allow freedom for people to choose what are the most important things to them. But I think there is this sort of obvious statement, which is if you decide that teaching about sustainability is important, build an appropriate curriculum, discuss that obviously with your academics to understand what you need to have in it. Actually, that I don't see as being an infringement on academic freedom.
So, Mr. Baty, could you add your thoughts on this? On the relationship between the institution-wide commitment and the important principles of academic freedom?
Yeah, look, I think from Times Higher Education's perspective, I think it goes hand in hand with institutional autonomy as well. I think universities should be autonomous and should be given as much freedom from government as possible. Great universities often take a lot of public funding and then want to be left alone, and that's where lots of great things happen. So from Times Higher Education's perspective, I think we would really support the principle of institutional autonomy and of academic freedom. And the THE framework really is about creating incentives and nudges. We do a lot of data and analytics, and it's really a question of saying, look, we would like to celebrate and incentivize and demonstrate universities who are making a commitment and doing exciting things with regards to driving forward the sustainable development agenda. But to some of Duncan's other points, I think, we're not really talking about anything other than critical engagement with some of the most important issues facing the world today. I think there is a sense of, I hate the sort of fake balance, the false equivalence of saying, you've got pretty much the entirety of the climate science community who are absolutely adamant, humans are driving a climate emergency, and then a fringe group of deniers. That's gone now. We need to talk about this as fact, and facts that are existentially challenging our entire existence. So I think a university that wouldn't want to integrate these sorts of conversations across the curriculum, not just in the STEM subjects, but in the social sciences and the humanities subjects, I think would be actually doing their students a disservice. We can't not address the biggest issues facing humanity across the wide range of curriculum. And then on a more narrow level, we can't not equip our young people with the skills they need to face a really challenging, uncertain future and to address the biggest threats to our society. So I would very much hope it's a series of carrots and not sticks, and incentives rather than compulsion, because I think you should respect that freedom and autonomy. But a university that's not making these issues fundamental to their teaching would appear, in my view, to be completely missing a really important part of their responsibilities.
Thank you so much. We have a comment from Peter Graham here, who's talking about the what happens before students get to the university level, and the education that exists at higher schools and earlier stages. And Madame Maccarone, you're part of the Quebec School English School Board of Associations and the Sir Wilfrid Laurier board as well. And I'm wondering, what are your views on how to better integrate sustainability at those earlier stages as well?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I agree 100% with what Mr. Baty was saying, but it's the point that I was trying to address earlier, that even though the question is specific to universities, we absolutely need to go further, and we need to have open, honest, transparent dialogue when we're talking about climate and economic and ecological crisis. And so we need to prepare our students from an early age to be environmentally conscious. It's not just the responsibility of the university level. We need real change to happen. In order to do that, you need to start with environmental awareness in your elementary schools and in your high schools. And this should be done in each class if it's not a course on its own, because we know that the challenge that we have right now in our youth sector education curriculum is that it's packed, and we put a lot of responsibility in that area of expertise and education, and saying to our teachers that you have to teach everything, regardless of what it is. We have to teach you everything that's related to social media, to social awareness, to social justice, to environment, to racism, right? We make them, it becomes this all-encompassing conversation that needs to happen. So it's going to be difficult for them to pivot and transition, but it could be done in a variety of different ways across the curriculum, because learning the difference between garbage recycling and composting is something that can start at a very young age in an art project, for example, creating awareness about the protection of the planet and our natural resources. What's clean energy? What's overconsumption? What does it mean when we say that our glaciers are melting? What do we mean when we're talking about the protection of biodiversity? All of this can happen in a more formal part of your English language courses, your French language courses, and of course your science courses. From kindergarten onwards, you could make it an integral part of the curriculum while still learning all of those core competencies. And those are the kinds of programs that the government should be investing in. Those are the kinds of innovative initiatives that need to be part of the curriculum. And we need to support our teachers to be able to do that, because you can't expect everybody to be experts on all of it. And so what are we going to be doing to giving them that kind of accompaniment so that they can be successful? Starting in cégep and university, not that it's too late. I mean, we want to make sure that we've got it across all levels of education, but it needs to be instilled from childhood. We talk a lot about economic debt and what we're leaving to our future generations, but what we need to talk about is the environmental debt that's equally likely to affect their health and their quality of life. And so making it sustainable means that we're starting early on and being brutally honest about what's happening so that we can actually name the problem and then address it to do better.
And in terms of the packed curriculum, one model I think about that is a John Molson School of Business at Concordia, who just went through a complete restructuring of their curriculum, that had it like it was a couple multi-year process, and it included different aspects, but they did include sustainability course as mandatory for all the students, while also maintaining the same number of credits, so without adding additional work or the additional burden for the students, and I find that model inspiring. And going back to Laval's model, Mr. Fouché, in our conversations before this chat, we were talking about how the grassroots support for this kind of institution-wide initiatives have to be also supported by the top-down kind of approach as well. So it has to go from both directions. It has to be institutional leadership and also support from the grassroots. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how Laval University is kind of navigated having this kind of top-down mandate while also being respectful of the important principles of academic freedom.
Yeah, just before answering your question, I had two comments for the two previous things that I've heard from Phil and Jennifer. Sorry, I'm looking for my words in English. I think also about what Phil was saying, that teaching, we must teach about sustainability in a positive way. We must teach and look to the future through the lenses of opportunities, to talk about solutions, not only about problems and deniers. Sorry for that, but I don't think they're part of the solution, the ones who are denying climate change or whatever. And for the Key 12 job of sensitization, I'm all agreeing to all what Jennifer was saying. And I think that, well, I'm going to say it roughly. I think sensitization is the job of the K-12 approach. But at CEGEP and universities, I would strive to implement, to link sustainability to a professional level, not only about behavior or recycling or composting. No, what are the impacts of what you will be doing for the next 40 or 50 years? Mm-hmm. And as for the question you asked about Université Laval, well, in my perspective, grassroots approaches must coexist with top-down for any transformation to occur. And previously, I presented the 97% indicator calculations in policymaking. Well, that was all technocratic bullshits or approaches or discourses. But change in teaching are not numbers and indicators. We have to face masters of disciplines. We have to face the teachers. And we never tell them what to teach or how to teach. They're masters of their disciplines and their areas of knowledge. So the how to embeds initiation to sustainability at Laval is determined with subsidiarity, with the rightful person at the rightful place. So the teacher for his course, the program committee for a program approach. An institution doesn't provide a mandatory courses or a necessity to talk openly about sustainability as a requirement. It can be about energy efficiency in your approach, or community empowerment for theology or whatever, animal wellness for agriculture. And as for the non-dedicated to sustainability programs, as mathematics, statistics, or geomatics for the purpose, they do contribute for models, for understanding our world and building matrices and giving codes for satellites to measure climate change. But what we were able to do, because algebra is algebra, it can be embedded with sustainability, but maybe in the examples or whatever, mathematics, as for example, we've asked them not to implement sustainability in their mandatory courses, but to add a little regulation in the optional classes to look elsewhere, to embed, to sensitize their students to sustainability. It's
so you have
a variety of approaches.
So you would have an elective class where people can select from a list of sustainability
From
courses.
a list of 6 or 10 sustainability-related courses. So there's a mandatory course, an optional rule.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I also, like, education happens at through multiple stages, and I think like high school provide kind of the general appreciation of fundamentals, and then at university we get like the specialized training, and at the high school I think we should have like the mandatory courses to give the the general appreciation, and like the composting and the sorting, and what Madame Maccarone was saying, and then at university we should, I think, appreciate that a lawyer contributes differently than a journalist and an artist and a teacher and a policymaker, and so there has to be discipline specific sustainability training.
We are complement in our approaches to look for sustainable. Whatever. Sorry.
Just staying with you here, you also talked about bravery at the senior administration level, to be able to work with the community, try to push that institution-wide mandate, and then also provide the resources to help get that mandate executed. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you meant by that?
Well, first I would say if universities can't change, can't provide exemplarity, who will? So yes, we were bold in 2009 with that article in teaching, or with that engagement by the top management towards sustainability. And that top-down approach does help in fundings for mandates attribution or for legitimacy. Also, at that time in 2007 or 2009, we didn't have any clear criteria or theoretical anchor to state what is and what ain't sustainability. That's where key competencies of sustainability came in handy for our approaches. And with our new administration now in 2017, after a large consultation process, our institutional mission begins with driven by a deep-seated culture of sustainable development. So we took it and we tried to put it the higher place possible within our mandate, within our mission. We will all be doing what we did yesterday, but within a deep-seated culture of sustainability. And now in 2022, to support a faster ecological transition, we now look to integrate and implement sustainable development goals as a common language. It's a way, I would say, to help me, to help persons who try to implement sustainability, to add layers of sustainability. You're not just sustainable or not. It's now adding granularity, details to sustainability, helping any discipline to find anchors in their fields of works or research to contribute to this common goal of building a better future. Talking about a thing is a thing, but to engage action towards sustainability in its professional life is another. And that's the whole idea of our intern sensitization programs, to go from sustainable development to SDGs. How do you contribute to this better future?
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Baty, we mentioned the Concordia, the Times Higher Education question on SDG, and Concordia answered yes to this question, that they have a commitment to meaningful education that applies to everybody. And then, a month later, Concordia answered no to essentially the same question at STARS, right? So so I just to start, I was very happy to read Duncan's blog here. This is Biscuit, his horse, where he said that question will be modified to explicitly ask if there are mandatory sustainability courses for all students, or selective or elective sustainability courses, or if it's going to be integrated across the full curriculum. And I understand that, when you have hundreds of answers from thousands of universities worldwide, there's only so much vetting that can take place. But I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about your perspective on how do you make sure that your rankings reflect the reality of the quality of the education being provided at a specific university, versus universities saying whatever these things they can get away with, right? And I'm wondering if there's room for cross-referencing, for example, between the different ranking bodies to kind of spot these instances.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a very early initiative. So we've been producing the World University Rankings since 2004, which is very traditional, research-intensive universities with a global outlook. Harvard and McGill and Oxford, Cambridge are all at the top. It's a traditional ranking that's based on research excellence, which actually examines, literally 100 million citations. So incredibly deep understanding of research influence, for example. The The impact rankings are very new. We created them in 2019. We frame them across the entirety of the SDGs. So there's 17 different rankings and an overall ranking. We've created a set of targets specific to higher ed that mirror the hundreds of specific targets within the goals. And although there is a lot of data that is independent of the universities, we do look at research excellence in terms of research, new knowledge creation that's relevant to the sustainability agenda. We do have a lot of information that we ask universities to sort of self-report. The way we handle it is we want to create a sort of publicly accountable space. So we tend to have a lot of tick boxes where we say to universities, in terms of sustainability, do you do X, do you do Y? Have you got net zero targets? What are you doing with regards to, recycling on your campus, right through to their activities in decent work and economic growth, et cetera, et cetera. What we tend to do with the tick box approach is we ask them, do you have a policy of X or Y? Then we ask them to show us the policy, and then we ask them if the policy is in the public domain. Yeah. So we do base it on a lot of trust, but actually there's additional points for providing the evidence and then also making sure that evidence is public. And I think for us, the idea of making that evidence public so it can be shared as widely as possible so others can scrutinize and learn from it is a really powerful mechanism. Mm-hmm. We do employ, and actually the rankings are growing so quickly. A wonderful sign is that actually, I think this year, well over 1,700 universities globally have voluntarily joined and submitted huge amounts of data. As the rankings grow, the burden of quality assurance becomes higher, but we actually do hire significant numbers, admittedly, of temporary staff, but we bring in, a couple of dozen temporary staff to sit for several weeks and review the submissions and cross-reference the evidence that's been supplied to justify a statement of a policy, and then to check if it is in the public domain. So it's quite a painstaking project because there's obviously many thousands of evidence submissions.
I would say on both ends, it is painful.
Yeah, so we do the commitment shown by the universities to take part is something we are incredibly grateful for, but we hope it supports that university in building its own internal view of its sustainability and its commitment, and B, showing external stakeholders that commitment. So it's not just showing students, look, we are making this commitment, we can demonstrate to you that we care. Also, it's about showing stakeholders like governments and business partners, NGOs, that actually these universities are doing some great work in the field of impact, in the field of sustainability. So it's a mechanism that I hope to show funding providers and governments that these universities are making a really important contribution to the world and making the world a better place. So Daniel, thank you so much. All the universities that submit, we think they're creating a massive global resource to share good practice and to celebrate good practice. And we hope it's a really positive way of rethinking what excellence looks like, rethinking how we understand universities' contribution to making the world a better place.
Maybe I can complement.
It'd be interesting to see a government hold a commission on that, because we could certainly be studying that, all the results, and have people like you come in to present, so that when we were talking about earlier what we could do from a policy level, it's based on the research and all of the best practices that are currently in place.
Yeah, and I think for us, we want to make this a public resource. It's a ranking, okay? So it's a student consumer guide. They all look at it and help them make decisions. It helps universities demonstrate their strengths. But for us, we're creating this great global database of practice. And the more we can share that with policymakers or potential funders, the better. So we're delighted to try and make that data available for public consumption and policymaking.
If I can complement, I would say that, yes, it's painful, but it does provide, first of all, a reputation, a position, for a ranking for universities that find their ways into that accreditation process. But also it provides comparative studies to get the best practices from who is higher than you. How can you be better? So it's also helping to assess, to add plans of action and to be better. It's for continuous improvement towards what? Towards better world contribution. So it's basically virtue.
Yeah, we're incredibly proud and so excited to see the community embrace this as a really powerful mechanism to support this positive change.
Do you foresee the data that you ask for and the world medians that you calculate from all the participants being an open database or like a public database that that can be accessed and used to benchmark?
Yeah, I mean, there's a slightly challenging element that we are a commercial organization, but I think the most important thing for us is that we do publish as much of it as possible to provide that good practice. And obviously, the ultimate goal is we require or try and incentivize the universities to make sure that their policies are all in the public domain. And then there will be ways and mechanisms to draw attention to that, and hopefully, tell the stories, but then point to the public information. And one of the things I've seen which has been really exciting is universities creating new public portals that really starts to express this work and categorize the work around the SDGs. And actually, I think it was a Canadian institution, Dalhousie, I think, has just published some really quite impressive public resource area that's obviously celebratory, but includes all this information around what they're doing against all the individual SDGs. So we hope to incentivize that sort of that sense of public commitment.
I can confirm to you, Phil, that Mr. Baty, that it was a strong argument. The fact that ETH impact ranking does exist and does provide accreditation, it was a strong argument to go from SD to SDGs approach at ULaval.
Thank you. And you can call me Phil anytime, Daniel.
Oh, okay. Well, speaking of Dalhousie, and as we wrap up the discussion, I wanted to highlight that this movement is growing, and actually, like last month, I participated in an education and sustainability education summit that the University of Waterloo organized, and there were also participants from Dalhousie students, and who are leading similar initiatives both at the University of Waterloo and Dalhousie and other universities. And also, I saw earlier this week, also actually through Mr. Baty's LinkedIn, that University of Barcelona just decided to make a mandatory climate crisis module, not only for all of their students, but actually all of their staff as well. And that was following a week-long sit-in by the students at the University of Barcelona. And what I found remarkable to me is that there were this entire story was very remarkable, but one of the things that was remarkable is that there were over 200 professors actually backed up the students in this protest, and that really pushed the university to make that commitment. You mentioned eco-anxiety earlier, and how students are feeling kind of powerless and that their voices are being ignored by institutions, and this example of University of Barcelona kind of reminds me also of the 2012 Quebec student protest that was against tuition hikes at the time, and it did force the government to reconsider some of these hikes. What's your message to the students trying to demand their university do their jobs, and also to the teachers? Yeah.
So, well, I'd say, first of all, I really sympathize with all the young people who feel overwhelmed by the massive environmental challenges that we continue to face. And governments and policymakers really need to put into place actions that are going to fight climate change, but they need to do that in consultation with the younger generations who are going to be directly impacted, but also because it's the younger generations that are really going to lead the way, as you've mentioned, like what we've seen in the past. Professors, you have the power to create an environment where students feel heard by fostering all those positive and productive discussions on topics that that these students are passionate about. So, of course, my message is I'd like to encourage our educational leaders to create those constructive discussions with their students. It's a great step toward the application of knowledge outside of the classroom to the community, which is where we need it to be, right? So students that you're looking to get your voices heard, learn as much as you can about the issues that you're passionate about, and understand that even though today we're talking about things like climate change, of course, has an impact on all of the other disciplines that was mentioned earlier. So learn about all those things and learn about all the intersectionality of all those subjects. It's going to allow you to make better suggestions to your university and to your community outlets and advocates that are realistic, that are going to be feasible, and if they're realistic and feasible, it's going to be so much easier for you to build that constructive partner database in your network. And the more partners you have, the stronger your voices are going to be. Of course, then you know that you're answering the needs of your community about what's missing and what recommendations we need to have. That when you do come to your elected officials, so like people like me or at all levels of governance, you will be better equipped to have those conversations. And I think it's important for you to hear and understand that your voice is huge. The impact that you bring, the weight that you bring when you come and you meet with us and you say, this is what I want to work with you on. I want to develop that partnership. I want to help leverage and create new policies. It will carry a lot of weight, especially since you're going to have all of the background that you bring with you. And I know personally, I absolutely love meeting with the students in my riding and outside of my riding to talk about the things that they're passionate about and help them to bring their voices forward. But there's every avenue that's open to you. Learn what you can, bring it to people like me so that we can bring it forward for you and with you.
I'd just quickly throw in a comment that, a great university education should teach students to speak truth to power and question received wisdom, right? So actually universities should be really delighted that their students are actually getting really strong here. The protest should be welcomed. The Barcelona case is a great example. The 7-day sit-in, I think the comment was, we might have previously called in the police to get rid of them, but actually they stopped and paused and thought, do you know what? These students are actually speaking truth to power, challenging conventions, and that's a positive part of education. That's what we want from our next generation. So all power to the students to keep making noises and keep pushing the agenda.
Yeah, I that comment in the article also stood up to me because 10 years ago they would have called the police, and now they didn't do that because they know the students are right and they know the society supports them.
I can also add. I went once in STAR's education program for education relation to environment in Atlanta, and this positive. It's so talking. Martin Luther King in the 60s for the civil rights, he said, I have a dream. He never mentioned, I have a nightmare. Nobody would have followed him if he had stated, I have a nightmare. And today, with climate change and climate crisis, every teacher, every sensitizer, every influencer is saying, we have a nightmare. The future is wrong. And so it does feed anxiety, eco-anxiety about the future, and that's not helpful at all. So please go from I have a nightmare to I have a dream. And when you do have eco-anxiety, I have heard that the main remedy to eco-anxiety is through action. And that's what we need, action towards a better future, whatever that means to you.
So we're going over time, and I was planning to end here, but there was a story earlier this week that came up on CTV News, and I was going to ask Madame Maccarone to comment on it, where essentially Concordia shut down a daycare center that's provincially subsidized, that provides provincially subsidized childcare to its own faculty and staff. And I'm just going to run a clip from the news, and then I'm going to ask you to comment.
Staff and students at Concordia are upset that the on-campus daycare center is being forced out of its current location. The university has decided to take the space back. Christine Long has more.
Librarian Pamela Carson takes her 2 kids to daycare on Concordia's downtown campus.
We see it as a progressive university. Recently, there's a lot of talk about equity, inclusion, and diversity. I took the daycare for granted because I thought that, this was a given in terms of supporting equity for faculty, staff, and students.
From professors to students, they'll all have to find new daycare in a matter of months.
As parents who are professors, we need childcare to do the job, to staff those new spaces the university wants to create. So you can't build and take away at the same time, and that's why we're here. We're very upset about this illogical decision.
A decision they say was made without consultation.
We have no support here, right? And this, for many of us international students, is our child's second home. And to think that Concordia would be repossessing this daycare without giving us any alternate options is unthinkable after the last 2 years.
So, Madam Maccarone, would you comment on this?
First and foremost, my heart goes out to all of the families and, of course, the young, the children that frequent the CPE that are going to find themselves without a spot, because it is incredibly stressful. And regretfully, formerly I was the critic for families for the official opposition. And I can tell you a big challenge for the government, which they have unfortunately not met the expectation and reneged on their promises, was to create all of those spaces, the subsidized daycare spaces. There's 51,000 families that are waiting for spots right now. And so these families are going to find themselves in good company. But what's truly shocking about this is that it's already a CPE that's in existence. And so I share the disappointment with the families that there was a lack of consultation, especially in times where we are lacking in space. Obviously, because it's a downtown Montreal consideration, we're going to be faced with a parc immobilier that's going to be very challenging to find the additional space. So while I sympathize with the university too, because I know that they need to use their space to offer their educational resources, it's unfortunate that they didn't have a conversation to see what the alternatives were before making an announcement to say that they're going to close it. But it is complicated, just so people understand that it's not just any space that can be used to open up a youth education service for our little ones. There's regulations that are in place. There's guidelines that are in place that must be respected, because it's all about safety, security, and quality. I would be very happy to work with Concordia as well as the CPE to see what we can do to work together to find a long-term sustainable solution for this problem. Because if you've already got your permit, it would be a significant loss to be able to just let that go, because it's closing more spaces. I understand that there's also some spaces that are offered by the Concordia Student Union that are not subsidized. Those could also be converted. That's something that also could be done. So convert those spaces so that they become subsidized, and that might meet some of the need in the short term. But please tell them to contact me, and I'll do my best to support them throughout the process.
Thank you so much. And I would point out here that Times Higher Education also has a question on this impact rankings. What does the university provide childcare facilities for students and staff and faculties, and even go further if that not only subsidized, but if it's free as well. Well, with this, I want to say thank you to all of you. And I think on the eco-anxiety point, I think people feel helpless when they don't know how to help. And I think it's the job of our education institution to give people the tools, discipline-specific tools, to be able to contribute to systemic solutions and be able to actually help, so that we're no longer talking about just problems, but we're talking about solutions, not talking about nightmares, talking about dreams. And I really appreciate all your leadership on this, and all your work, and sharing your time and sharing your lunchtime with everybody. So thank you again, and enjoy your day.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Have a nice day.